Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is our Wednesday, September 13th, regular Board of County Commissioners work session, regular session, actually public session. And let's see, John, do we have any additions or deletions today?
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda today.
Okay, we will open it up with public comment. I think we have a special short presentation first.
Yes, we're sneaking in under public comment because your agenda was so busy that we thought we'd sneak this in. But I'm Pat Bingham, Community Relations Administrator for Picton County, and I'm here with Sandy Ferlisi, who is our marketing arm of Picton County that I work with a lot on a lot of these outreach campaigns, and she has the firm Aspen Marketing Partners. And the reason we're here today is that we have good news coming out of the landfill. And that, you know, how often do you have good things coming out of a landfill as opposed to going into a landfill? The Solid Waste Association of North America has named Picton County Solid Waste Center the winner of the SWANA Gold Excellence Award in the Awareness Campaign category for its Talking Trash campaign. This is the campaign that you probably are familiar with. These are just a couple of the many advertisements. We had these characters created. Sandy was instrumental in this project, who are talking about different subjects, everything from reusing items to reducing waste, recycling, textile recycling, and just most recently book recycling out at the landfill. It's been a clever campaign, and now it's gotten national attention. And while we were reveling in this SWANA award, where Kathy's going to go out to Baltimore to pick it up among all of her contemporaries in the waste management business, we were just reveling in that. We got another award, and it's called a Telly, and I think Greg Poshman is probably familiar with the Tellys. Tellys are given to, whoops, wait just a moment. They're small market video. They recognize small market video, and as part of this campaign, we did, I think, 7 different videos. I think we're up to about 7. And I wanted to play the most recent 2 for you so that you could see how creative they are, and they're just 15 seconds each. So.
And that's the award right there?
And the award, it kind of looks like an Academy Award.
Oh, yeah.
That's the Telly right there.
Zoom in on that, GrassRoots.
Well, that's because we shouldn't be here.
Don't they know we need special care? It's not easy being hazardous.
So that's one of our more recent ones, and then this is just another one I'd like to, if I can get the page to turn. Come on, baby. This is one of my favorites.
Eyes on me, Spud. You leftover piece of garbage.
Don't throw me away, Sarge.
No, I'm gonna turn you into something more.
Don't butter me up.
We'll make compost out of you yet, Spud.
So that's just an example of why we won the Telly, which we're pretty proud of. And Sandy just has a few analytics to share with just sort of the results of the campaign.
Yeah, just, real quickly, this was a real integrated campaign where we really took full advantage of these videos that we had produced, both for cable TV, social media, and something new where we are now on the movie theater screens at the ISIS and the Movie Land down in El Jebel before the screening. As well as the more traditional newspaper, radio, digital. We had a little over 4 million impressions, that's a little over 4 million sets of eyes seeing the message, and a cost per impression of a little over 1.5 cents, which is well below the national average of 2.
Now, whereas the ultimate goal is to extend the life of the landfill, and I'm not so sure that this campaign is going to achieve that, but it also achieves just educating the community about things that are good for the environment. There's so many creative things going on at the landfill that I think it's really fun. And just really quickly, Aspen Marketing Partners is Sandy's firm, and she is absolutely instrumental in the creation and the brainstorming and the creativity. Her team comes up with these concepts, and they've been brilliant. And just one last plug, and we'll be on our way. I have to give a plug for Kathy Hall, because she's one of the most out-of-the-box waste management managers I've ever worked with. She not only is running the landfill well, but she's thinking about things like, well, let's put our messaging at the Jazz Aspen concerts. Let's be a sponsor of 5 Point Film Festival. Let's get out in the community and educate. And she's done a fabulous job. And if it weren't for Kathy, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do what we've done. So, the
Good.
end.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sandy.
Sandy, good
Thanks for
job.
bringing it forward.
Great to see you.
Congrats.
And where would that
Look at
go?
that.
Where would
Need
that
a picture.
statue end
I'd
up?
like to thank my mother.
That-
Where will this end up?
Yes.
I don't know. Where will
A
that
new
end
building?
up? Whose desk is that going to end up on?
Kathy's, I'm sure.
Yeah, maybe out at the landfill, maybe? Or-
You can put it on one of the trucks, put it on the hood ornament.
Yeah, as a hood ornament. That would be.
The compactor. Put it on the
Thank you.
big truck.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much. Good
I'm
job.
sure Fleet could put it somewhere on one of those trucks.
All right, so we're going to open this up to public comment. If you would just come up, identify yourself, and please keep your remarks about 3 minutes, that would be great.
Great. My name is Craig Ward, and this is Ruthie Brown. We're here today to let you know about a great Olympic send-off that we're having in October. It's the 27th of October at Belly Up, and it's to send off Simi Hamilton and Noah Hoffman, who are headed to the World Cup circuit and the Olympics later on in 2018.
Thanks, Ruby.
We're hoping to raise about $200,000 from the local community. We've gotten a lot of business sponsors, personal sponsors. We're going out to foundations. There's in the packet that I gave you, there's a lot of expenses of the U.S. ski team that are not covered. Neither of these guys really are sponsored per se also. And so there's huge deficits in the U.S. ski team funding for the programs. They don't even have a men's head coach, believe it or not. And in this day and age, when we're competing against Europeans that have upwards of $15 million in their war chests per year to sponsor their teams, the U.S. ski team is obviously funded through contributions. And so we're hoping that you might consider something. I don't know if the county has that in any sort of a contingency fund, but we'd love to get your support if that's at all possible.
Great, thank you.
Can you just address the historic nature of these two athletes?
Well, as many of you know here, we started the Aspen Snowmass Nordic Council, and the county was a big part of that back in 1984. And after we started the trail system, which is now fully funded through the County Open Space and Trails Board, we've got these two athletes that have grown up on this trail system. And it's just amazing that we have two guys on the relay team representing the United States that are from Aspen. You know, everyone knows Aspen is an alpine resort, but it's amazing that throughout this United States, we've got two guys on the team, and they're two of the best guys. Simi is actually ranked 9th in the world in sprinting. I don't even think Andy Mill was ranked 9th in the downhill when he raced. But anyhow, it's just a wonderful kind of confirmation of all the steps we've taken over the years to have a wonderful cross-country trail system here, and these guys are now representing us. So we hope you can be supportive.
Good, thank you very much.
So can we put this on a future work session agenda for a discussion out of our contingency fund and an update on where the contingency fund is?
Well, we have it as a part of an open discussion for sure.
Okay.
That'd be
I don't
great.
think- I
Thank you
don't
very
think
much.
it's a work
Other than
session.
that, we can all attend individually. And
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Great,
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Good to see
Congratulations
you.
on that.
Yeah.
Proud mama.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Proud community, too.
Anybody else wishing to make any public comments that is not on today's agenda? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment and bring it back for commissioner comments. Patty?
Just real quick, we had the pleasure yesterday of driving over the pass, the board. We went over and met with the Lake County Commissioners. It was great lunch. They opened up the little cafe in Twin Lakes special for us because they were closing down early for some septic work over there in their septic tanks replacements. So we were able to have lunch there. The Lake County Commissioners were great fun. We talked about a lot of very interesting things. I see Brian Pettit here. The first thing on our agenda was talking about trucks on Independence Pass. The Lake County Commissioners weren't really familiar with that, so we brought them up to speed, told them what we were doing on this side, that we would keep them in the loop on how it works on this side, so hopefully we can work on that side. We talked about a variety of topics. It was great, and the leaves were fantastic. Driving up this side of the pass, everything was green until you hit a certain elevation, and then everything bingo changed to bright yellow, and then the other side, all the oranges and reds are popping out. So if anybody has an opportunity this coming couple weeks before the leaves are totally turned and gone, it was a beautiful drive. Lots of traffic, especially when we were coming back, a line of 40, 50 cars we saw heading over the pass. So please be careful if you're up there, especially for those who are riding their bikes. But it was great fun. It's been beautiful here in town. And this weekend, starting I believe tomorrow morning, is the 50th anniversary of Ruggerfest. There will be 50 teams here in town competing, so it's going to be a weekend full of rugby. So for those of you who have been rugby fans in the past, it's a great chance to get out there again. And for those of you who have never seen a rugby match, it's pretty exciting and very confusing, so be prepared. So enjoy.
Thank you. Other commissioner comments? Greg?
Just a brief one. One article in the news trending right now is how sitting for too long can kill you, no matter how much exercise you get. And it's recommended that if you're sitting, anybody in the community, including people sitting at these tables, 30 minutes is about as long as you want to sit before you get up and move around. So I just wanted to say that if you see me stand up and stand in the background here occasionally, it's not that I'm trying to leave the room or anything. I'm just trying to
stay alive.
Yeah, we're just trying to, take care of our health. And I think we should all pay attention to that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments?
Just one other thing, George, real quick. I think we all need to keep in our thoughts and prayers the people both in Texas and the people in Florida and in the South from the horrendous impacts of the recent hurricanes. So for those of you who haven't contributed to one of the fundraisers, please do so. It's going to be a long process of rehealing and rebuilding.
It should be noted that we have staff down at Key West, down on the Keys right now, and another staff member going down to help out as well. Maybe John could update everyone.
Yeah, so just a quick update. We have started receiving requests, and it comes through state mutual aid emergency management requests from state to state, and then the state pushes those requests out to local jurisdictions. And just so the board and the public knows, we, through our emergency management office next week, will be setting this up as our own incident to just kind of practice on in terms of taking these requests in, vetting them, and deploying resources as appropriate. Prior to that happening, we did get a request for logistics support. So Ben Ferrara, who is our procurement officer, did deploy down to Key West. It was quite an adventure getting down there. We'll have him tell that tale at some point. But he is now providing logistical support for procurement and the initial emergency response, and we'll be down there for 2 weeks. We know we've also had requests for safety inspectors through our building department, and I would just anticipate that we will continue to get requests. It's an opportunity for us to do the right thing as an organization, and it's also an opportunity for our staff to see and become practiced in emergency response should we find ourselves in a position of having to respond to a major disaster in the future. So it's good for us and for our community too. So we'll keep you posted. We're going to be having that discussion next Wednesday with our leadership team and kind of standing up an opportunity for us to take in those requests and respond to them.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John.
There are former Aspenites living down there that haven't checked in yet also. There's a letter in the paper today about a family that needs help or an appeal for help. There's a lot of Aspen connections in the Keys in particular. Mm-hmm. So we're still hoping to check in on some of these people.
And I think we will receive requests both in the initial response from Florida and Texas, and I think we'll see those ramp up actually over the next few months as they move from initial response to recovery. And that's where the logistics are really going to be challenging.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Whatever we can do to help.
All right, we're going to move on to our consent items. This is a single reading. It's the minutes of the regular meeting of August 23rd.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. We're going to move now on to our individual consideration items. These are first readings. They're set for public hearings on September 27th. The first is an ordinance granting an underground right-of-way easement to Holy Cross Energy and approving the extension of additional electrical facilities to the Pickens County Solid Waste Center for the purpose of leachate treatment.
That's right. I'm Brian Pettit. I'm the Public Works Director. And this, the board talked about this last Tuesday where we talked about leachate treatment at the landfill. And in order to do that, we need to provide power to the leachate treatment facility, which basically volatilizes volatile organic, which is vinyl chloride. And so we looked at different options on how to provide power, and the most efficient and long-term way to do it is through Holy Cross with an overhead power line. In order to do that, Holy Cross requires 3 agreements to be struck. This ordinance would provide the easements necessary and the facility necessary for Holy Cross to extend electrical service to our leachate treatment facility, which is currently being installed. We hope that Holy Cross can do this extension for between $40,000 and $50,000. We will be signing a sole source contract with them to do that, but this needs to be in place before that takes place.
Right. Any questions for Brian? Steve?
Brian, with our solar installation we're planning at the landfill, will that provide enough electricity for offsetting this leachate system?
Absolutely. There's 2 solar projects, and yes, the answer is yes, Steve. One is for the existing materials recovery facility, and the other will be proposed as part of the Use It Again facility that the board will be considering in the near future. But between the 2 solar projects, there'll be more than enough to cover this use.
Okay, great. Glad to hear that.
I'll make a motion to approve, set for second reading and public hearing on September the 27th.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Brian?
Next is an ordinance approving the lease with Mountain Family Health at 123 Emma Road in Basalt.
Thank you, George. John Peacock, County Manager, and with me I have 2 representatives from Mountain Family Health Centers, Annette Fronta and Gary Shala, who are here to answer any questions that the board may have. This is really execution of a lease pursuant to a letter of intent that the board had reviewed as an agreement between Mountain Family Health Centers, Aspen Valley Hospital, and Pickens County. And the intent of the lease is really to expand the availability of affordable primary care, mental health, and dental services to those who may not otherwise have access to pay, either because of the cost of those services or being underinsured or not insured at all. And so Mountain Family Health Centers is our federally qualified health plan. In Pickens County right now, we have approximately 4,500 residents that are living at 200% of poverty level or below. That's just over 25% of our population. And that population is challenged to find access to affordable primary care, dental, and mental health services. As a federally qualified health plan, Mountain Family Health Centers does provide those services regardless of ability to pay. Currently, Mountain Family Health Centers is located in Basalt. It's in a facility that's shared with Aspen Valley Hospital. Currently, Mountain Family Health Centers is in just over 3,000 square feet that the hospital is providing. And within that space, Mountain Family Health has a capacity to serve approximately 2,000 of that population of 4,500 that we're really targeting. As the board is aware, when we began the remodel project that you can see right out this window of our Courthouse Plaza facility, we had rented space at 123 Emma Road. About a month or two after we moved in, that facility came up for sale. The county did purchase that facility. It had the short-term win of reducing the lease payments while providing really a fungible asset for the county. And as we were facing the challenges, that was just about the time that our public community health services, human services, Mountain Family Health, and the hospital were starting the discussions with the county about the challenges to access to care. And we saw an opportunity, and that opportunity really was to negotiate an agreement between the three entities to try and solve this access to care issue. And so the building that we bought has approximately 15,000 square feet, just over 15,000 square feet. In it, currently the county is using just over 9,000 square feet of that facility. We will be using that until June 2018. The opportunity we saw was to switch the lease agreement from the facility that's provided by Aspen Valley Hospital to the space that we are currently in. And so what is in front of you today, we are first reading on a lease. It is a 20-year lease with 10-year renewals. The lease is for Mountain Family Health to occupy that 9,000 square feet that the county is currently in. The lease would be provided to Mountain Family Health at a base amount of $150,000 a year to increase by 2% or 1/2 of Denver Boulder CPI, whichever is less. The leases or the premises are provided in as-is condition. Mountain Family Health then is obligated through our letter of intent to provide the capital improvements to convert that space to provide for primary care, mental health, and dental services. Also to provide ADA access to the second floor. And most importantly, to provide the services access to primary care, mental health, and dental services regardless of ability to pay. The hospital, for their part, has committed in a separate agreement with Mountain Family Health that the $150,000 was really what the hospital's in-kind contribution was for their existing facility. They've agreed to convert that into a cash contribution to Mountain Family Health to escalate at 1/2 of Denver Boulder CPI or 2%, whichever is greater. So really that would pass through from Mountain Family Health to the county as the hospital's contribution to that. We're working on separate agreements from this lease agreement that's in front of you today, and we've reached those in principle about ongoing funding of operations and subsidy towards operations. One thing that you will see in the AIS right now that is not represented in the lease document is we do have an alternative anticipated right now to roll back the amount of lease space from 9,000 to just over 8,000 square feet with a lower annual contribution. Really, the reason that we mention that and that we're thinking about these alternatives is that certain funding that Mountain Family Health Centers relies on, and I think Annette and Gary could probably address this better than I, certainly has come into question, you know, with recent policy announcements from the new administration, particularly Medicaid expansion is very important there. So we wanted to just both have the discussion that we understand that right now we're planning for conditions not to change. But if they do change, we've had some conversations about reworking these agreements. The reason that we're doing this so soon, right now, you know, so far ahead of time, versus waiting, to get closer to that lease date to see how this works out, is it really helps Mountain Family Health in their capital campaign to have that solid commitment from the county and a lease agreement agreed to as they're going out and seeking donors to help support the capital improvements that will need to be made. So really what is in front of you today as a first reading, it'll be back to you in 2 weeks, authorizing the chair to sign the lease document that is substantially in the form attached upon approval by the county attorney's office. And then Gary and Annette, I don't know if you have anything that you'd want to add to this at this point?
Any questions from the commissioners, we'll be happy to take.
Okay.
All right, any questions? Greg?
If you could elaborate more again, I didn't quite follow you on how the lease agreement might change. You're trying to be nimble, I understand that. Could you just give a little more detail?
Yeah, so right now,
more detail, thank you.
Within the lease agreement, we have the 9,000 square feet. There is no alternative within the lease as it's written. What we want the board to be aware of is that we have had the conversations with Mountain Family Health Centers and the hospital about the challenge of being able to use this much space and serve the full number of people that we're anticipating if Medicaid were to be cut or if the Medicaid expansion. And so we really talked about a fallback alternative should conditions change, should some of these policy discussions that have been floated out there convert to real policy, that we would probably need to come back with an amended lease, and that would come back in front of the board for approval at another public hearing. Right now, we're moving forward anticipating that those conditions will not change, that we are going to implement the plan as we originally conceived to fully be able to serve that population that is at that 200% of poverty level or below.
Thanks for that.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to see this come forward and to be supporting it at this time. I've added kind of small correction. I don't think the transfer and everything like that is that far off. When we're planning on moving into our new building of June of next year, that's very, very close, especially for a large capital campaign. So I think this is very timely to be doing this at this point in time. And while we're all seeing a lot of uncertainty federally, and Pickens County is certainly weighing in on that and trying to let our representatives know how important this is to our population, I did read yesterday where the Senate subcommittee appropriate to this topic has agreed to a 5-year extension of CCHIP, and that's the children's insurance program. So that at least one small piece goes forward, and that's certainly a large part of the population we're tending to. So I'm very happy to move this forward.
Patty?
Yeah, I'm happy to move this forward also, and to do it sooner than later so that everybody can be prepared. This is critical. This service is critical to the people in this community and valley-wide, and to not be able to provide any level of care such as you will be providing would really hurt a lot of people and a lot of families. So I think it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for the county to be able to help with this. The timing of us renting the building, purchasing the building, moving out of the building, you moving into the building, just works in the best interest of the community, and I'm really happy to move this forward. And thank you.
Steve?
One question, John. The meeting room in the upstairs that is the double diamond or the black diamond or whatever we call it, is that the space that is flexible, the lease that might or might not be leased?
It includes the attorney's office and that. It's that whole upstairs space. So the alternative right now that we had looked at was the downstairs space that the county is currently in. And so right now, upstairs we have the attorney's office and that double diamond meeting room.
Okay. And then in our packet it mentions that meeting space being available for Pickens County and Aspen Valley Hospital.
That's correct.
Could you explain that?
Really,
use of that?
Yeah, it's set up as a conference room space, and so what we had talked about was the ability to just on a scheduled basis all three entities being able to use that conference room space. So it'll be scheduled just like, we'll have to set up I don't know if it'll be a Google Calendar. I'll have to have somebody else figure that out for me. But yeah, and so, this is a really amazing partnership, really, between the hospital, between Mountain Family Health Centers and the county. And we just saw an opportunity that all of us could maybe use some of that space together since we're all in partnership on providing it.
Okay, good.
Good. Do we need a motion here?
I will make a motion to approve on first reading, set for second reading and public hearing on September the 27th.
Second.
With great pleasure do I make that motion.
Okay, motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Great, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank
See you
you.
again.
Thank you for all you do.
See you in 2 weeks.
Okay, next is an ordinance authorizing the acquisition of the Rebecca Brunson parcel.
Thank you, George. I'm Dale Will, Acquisition Manager with Pitkin County Open Space and Trails. John's going to help me get a map up on the screen here. While he's doing that, I can start describing this property. Let's see, it should be right in the top level. Scroll down, maybe.
Dale, while you're waiting, a quick
Oh,
question.
there we go. Brinson parcel map.
Dale,
Sure.
while you're waiting, it's a quick question. Don't we normally have a work session before comes before us as a public session for approval on a reading? No, it seems like in the past when we have acquisitions or potential acquisitions, we always seem to have a discussion prior before. So that the Open Space and Trails Board knows that we are supportive and there's no glitches.
So George, oftentimes you will either have an executive session discussion or such about an acquisition. I think, as Dale may be able to describe, I think there's some this is a little bit smaller purchase, and there's also, I think, some pressure on timing because there are potentially other suitors for the property.
Okay.
Both those things are true. We try to keep the commissioners apprised during our quarterly joint meetings. I believe this property was mentioned in a packet during a quarterly joint meeting in an exec session, but I certainly didn't mean to take anyone off guard by bringing this forward. As John mentioned, this property is listed for sale, and I got direction from the Open Space Board to pursue it and authorization to make an offer, and then learned that the landowner had received another offer, and we were kind of in competition to get ours first in line, which we were successful at doing. The property is 6.3 acres, and it's depicted here on this map as this yellow wedge that you see, but I wanted to put it in a larger context because I think that's what's really driving the interest of the Open Space Board. To the top of this map, the big red area, the kind of polygon, is Redwind Point, a property that the county acquired back in, I think, 2003. To the south of Redwind Point is Crystal River Country Estates, one of the subdivisions up the Crystal where there are about 30 homes. And then you'll see there's this sliver of public land that runs really all the way from the summit of Mount Sopris, right about where it says State of Colorado, and the legend here would be the north peak of Mount Sopris, and that drops down to the Crystal River, and there's a sliver of public land that has seen prior investments by Open Space. It started out as a 500-foot wide piece of Forest Service land that reached all the way to the river, and years ago we were able to acquire this red square that's kind of in the center of the map for a surprisingly low amount of money. In retrospect, we paid $75,000 for that. the Brunson parcel itself is already burdened by a trail easement that Peter Mertz sold to the county back in 2009. But when we looked at this, and especially if you visit it on the ground, there's a kind of a shoulder of land. You can see the depression where the drainage is coming off of Mount Sopris. This Brunson parcel is up on a high spot that has kind of a nice buffer between the subdivision and this public land strip to the south. So I got to thinking, well, with all of the discussion about Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep that's going on, it would seem to us that having the ability to manage this wider area as a piece of public land with all the management tools that we can bring to bear, seasonal closures and that sort of thing, it could be useful. So I asked Jonathan Losky, who's under contract with the county to provide wildlife opinions, what he thought, and he agreed, and some of his observations are in the memo, but there's a small amount of this property at the far right of the wedge that's actually in a bighorn sheep production area. A larger amount of it is in winter range, and Jonathan agreed that having this wider area become a public land sort of reserve would be a good thing in giving us management tools. So as I mentioned, the property's listed for sale. It is accessed through the subdivision roads at Crystal River Country Estates. At one time it had an approval to put a house kind of right in the middle that would require the construction of a driveway up a fairly steep slope. Those approvals have lapsed, and I have been in conversation with community development about it, and they've said, well, you know, we can't know what would happen if someone buys this and comes back in to rejigger those approvals. There are slope issues. On the other hand, it was once awarded a development approval. So with all that in mind, and given the fairly modest price, it's listed for $299, and the owner accepted our offer of $275. We thought it was a worthwhile thing to bring forward. Of course, everyone remembers last year Open Space adopted its biodiversity policy that we would be pursuing acquisitions and also management with protection of biodiversity being a priority. So I want to be emphatic that we already own an easement to utilize a remnant of the old Crystal Railroad grade on the river's edge on this parcel, so it doesn't expand any kind of access that way, but it does create a much wider buffer that can be managed in conjunction with 500 feet of Forest Service and another 500 feet of this prior acquired open space, bringing the total up to 1,300 feet, let's say, approximately of width there, right on the shoulder of Mount Sopris.
So I know you said that you sort of have to react to this fairly quickly. Did Open Space have an appraisal done on this property?
We have not had an appraisal.
No. Is that normally what you would do?
Pursue appraisals if we are uncertain of value. In this case, because the lot is part of an existing subdivision, and in looking at what other subdivision lots sell for up and down the Crystal, this one I have to say has an extraordinary view, and it could be fairly private were it developed. We felt that this price is within the reasonable spread of what properties sell for. By comparison, it's we paid $500,000 for the bullpen parcel down on Prince Creek, so this is less than that. And at least in my opinion, I think it'd be a superior place to build a home. So,
great, thanks. Questions, Rachel?
Yeah, I just think that this is a good acquisition, and it's fairly straightforward, fairly simple. And has the type of wildlife values that we're committed to seeing Open Space protect. So I'm very happy to support this going forward.
Greg?
Just looking at the map here, it looks like there's evidence of a road. There's some improvement of some sort of the dirt road that cuts across. Is that the really steep section that you referred to?
Yes, that light spot. That road must have been kind of hacked in there with the lower part of it is probably done with a bulldozer, and the various owners that have had this property while they've been evaluating it have been driving in there, but you would need a pretty high clearance four-wheel drive to drive up that road the way it is now.
Right. And looking forward, if you acquire it, what would happen? What would become of that road and that cut?
Well, we have our management planning protocols, and open space follows those. We, of course, have the biodiversity policy that I already mentioned, but our typical approach to adopting a management plan on a piece of open space is to first inventory all the biological habitat values, and then look at the other open space values of the property. Our program is charged with protecting scenery, habitat, recreation, and agriculture. Of the four, probably not much to do with agriculture on this property, but the other three would apply, and we would draft a management plan based on those things and bring it forward to the Open Space Board. Certainly if the commissioners express an interest in one of our management planning processes, then we'll take the time to come get a check-in with you guys as well.
Great, thank you. I would support going forward with this.
Any other questions for Dale?
I'm good.
Let's see. I would make a motion to, where is that one? Approve an ordinance authorizing the acquisition of the Rebecca Brunson parcel.
Second.
Any further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye.
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 Great, thanks, Dale.
Thanks, Dale.
Thank you.
And thanks the Open Space Board.
I will.
Okay, we're going to move on to a public hearing. This is a one reading. This is an application for the renewal of a medical and retail marijuana license submitted by Cooper Mason Ventures, LLC, for a facility located at 24359 Highway 82, Basalt. And Jeanette's not here, so John Ely, you going to kick this off?
I will.
Great.
Jeanette couldn't make it today. Jeanette Jones is our marijuana licensing authority for the county, so I'll try to fill in best I can. You guys, we have two representatives from Cooper Mason LLC today, as well as Kurt Dahl from the county's Environmental Health Department. The applications in front of the board today are for two renewals. One renewal is for a retail cultivation license, and the second is for a medical marijuana cultivation license. Both licensed facilities are located in the same physical location on Highway 82, just outside of Basalt. The original licenses were granted to Cooper Mason back in 2014. This would be the third renewal that Cooper Mason has come in on for the same facilities at the same location. The renewal this year is not subject to any complaints or any objections that have been voiced to our licensing authority or to any of the departments within the county. Ordinarily, this would be an administrative procedure, but we are conducting a public hearing now because of past problems. And as the board knows, Cooper Mason ran into some difficulty in years past with odor and odor mitigation. They tried several different methodologies and finally hit on a procedure that has eliminated the problem to the best of anyone's ability to detect. Attached to Jeanette's AIS for the board are I was going to describe them as smell tests, but they're odor logs, I'll call them that Kurt put together based on calls and actual visits to the property. No noxious odors or odors of any kind have been detected off the property since the current protocols have been put in place. The recommendation is for renewal of both licenses. Currently, there is a requirement on the last renewal license that the smell testing, odor testing procedure remain in place. For this particular renewal, we are recommending that that be discontinued. It has not been demonstrated to be necessary by by any contacts with the county by any outside individuals. The other requirement that's a little unique is the public hearing for renewals that I mentioned just a minute ago. We're also recommending that that be discontinued and let the renewals continue according to the county's established marijuana regulations, such that renewals are administrative and handled by the licensing authority unless there's a complaint or there has been some request for a public hearing by a member of the public or a concerned party.
All right, thanks. Any questions for John? Steve?
John, on other grow facilities in the county, which I believe there are is there one or two of them?
There are at least 3 others off the top of my head.
Now, do they just do the administrative renewal at this time?
Yes. Well, we've had one facility with some issues, and that'll come to the board, but all the others have just been handled administratively.
Okay.
Unless they were asking for any sort of expansion or change of use in their license.
And then that is just a change in the license type of application.
Okay.
All right, the applicants, you'd like to make any presentations or statements or comments?
Just, it's very nice to be here without receiving all the complaints, so take it.
All right, well, this is a public hearing, so let's see if there's anyone from the public wishing to comment on this. If you just come on up and state your name, that would be great. You grab this mic up here, Dave.
At the podium.
Yeah,
Is
up
the
there
red
to
light on?
podium.
Is the red light on?
Yes.
Okay, then you're good.
Okay. I'm David Lambert. I just have a question. Is it one complaint that will trigger a public hearing next year, or is it more?
One complaint could do it.
And who does that complaint need to be lodged with?
The county receives complaints through any open door. Eventually, they make their way to Jeanette Jones, who's, as I mentioned, the marijuana licensing authority.
Okay.
So those doors could include the Environmental Health Department as the first.
Or us.
Community Development, the Board of County Commissioners, County Attorney, County Manager.
Okay.
And most people know how to find us.
Yes, they do. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else we should make a public comment on this? Yes?
I'm Ken Schuler. What David says, if a complaint's registered, then what's the process? We have to wait for the annual meeting to go through some kind of mediation, or is it addressed prior to, or it depends on the severity, or?
There is an investigation of the complaint by the county to determine the nature of the physical condition or operation at a facility, and then depending upon the severity of the circumstances, it's either brought up at a renewal application, and also depending on the time. If this is just a few weeks off of renewal, then it's easier to handle it there. But if it's many months off of a renewal, then the matter could be brought to the BOCC, and the BOCC can direct the staff to deal with the complaint, by some specific action, which can even be a revocation of a license, or wait until a renewal to allow the licensee an opportunity to address whatever the substance of the complaint was and to remediate the situation themselves.
So it's on the severity of the complaint, is that, and wait for the annual renewal?
I suppose certainly that, but any other factors that might be relevant.
Okay, that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Anybody else we should make any comments on this?
I would.
Well, no, you're the applicant, so hold on for a sec. I'll get back to you. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment on this and bring it back to the applicants.
Yep. One thing that I would like to bring to the board's attention is, as the largest cannabis taxpayer in the county, I was very proud to hear that $2,250,000 came back to the community, $2 million to Mine Springs, and $250,000 to Pitkin County in the form of a school resource officer to work with, mostly the younger, under 8th grade, but some high school students as well. This is you know, it's been a long time coming. We've been paying millions of dollars in taxes a year, and I know that the state has a formula for working its way back, but it was very nice for me to see that the money is finally working its way back. And, you know, I would like, it would be nice to, I just want this to be stated for the record today, because it was nice for me to hear, and I know that the community appreciates it, and this is really a result, directly a result of the tax contribution that the industry and Silver Peak in particular is making in the county. So,
thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Rachel?
I have a question which is a little more for staff than you. And I am in concurrence with the staff recommendations on this. I want a clarification of two things. One, the first is that if we should receive a complaint, it's not as if dealing with the complaint would wait until we have a hearing or until the BOCC is told at a work session. Our staff would begin to investigate the complaint, understand the nature of the complaint, see if, you know, what has misfired and how to correct it. So just to be clear, it's the complaint and hearings and licenses is over here, but immediate action to remedy the situation would be something the county would be taking forward as well, working with the owner. The second is to clarify, would we still have a specific phone number that people can complain, or how they can contact and know that it's been recorded and will be acted upon? How are we working with that?
We would no longer retain the services of an outside consultant to essentially drive up from Glenwood to investigate whatever might be reported. We would do that ourselves.
Okay, but is there more of a single right door that people would, a single number? You know, we've talked about a phone number for people to call on construction sites when they're, you know, not doing things right, and how do the neighbors reach out appropriately? So how do we handle the transition from calling the odor inspector in Glenwood to now knowing you call this number?
Literally, the county's not so big that we would lose anybody's outreach to us. So any open line will eventually route anything back to our licensing authority. You can call the licensing authority, which is Jeanette Jones, on the county's main trunk number, which is 920-5200. Or wait, 5200? Yeah. I'm always confused at 52 and 53 with us in the SO. Anyway, yeah, that number would be the singular number to call, but literally going in the door physically at any number of departments like we mentioned, or calling any of those departments, will route it all back around to where it should be.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted that information on the record.
Patty?
Yeah, that was going to be my point too, is I want to make sure people know they can just call the county's main line and we'll get you to the right person. And it's for complaints, concerns, suggestions, or compliments will be accepted also. So anybody, we like to hear from the public. We know how to deal with it, we know how to handle it, and we will act on it. So I want the public to be sure that we will follow up.
Steve?
Jordan, I look, every time I go by on the highway, my head will always turn towards your facility. And the last time I went by, I noticed a sprinkler running in the area of the catchment area for the water, and was like you were watering the landscape, but then I thought, well, maybe you were using a sprinkler as a means for putting water into the catchment basin, and I was just curious about that.
I don't know anything about that. I mean, I know we planted over 100 trees on the property, so we do have, we do have irrigation throughout the property, but that's all I know.
Yeah, and I was driving by, but I saw a sprinkler running over in that vicinity, and it just...
I don't know, I'll ask the manager of the facility.
Brought that question up in my mind.
Let me just ask, isn't that where you guys were burying a water storage tank, and maybe you're trying to get a little grass growing after the construction and putting that tank in?
We've buried tanks throughout the property, yeah. And every square inch.
So I don't know if I don't know what you mean by catchment areas.
Well, there's that. It's
a depression.
Depression.
Yeah, it's a depression back on the back left side as you're looking from the highway.
I think it's just to get your landscaping going.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just to irrigate the property, I imagine.
Okay.
So we have three decisions. One, obviously, whether we are going to renew it or not, but staff's recommendations. The first is whether or not to continue the monitoring of odor from the facility. So I'd like to sort of see the board, if we have a consensus on that. Rachel, you've already spoken up on
I was just
that.
going to say, we extended it last year to be sure, to have one more year. And I wanted to just clarify this one point with the attorney. If we found there was an odor problem mid-year before the renewal and wanted to call it up, we could reinstitute the monitoring as a requirement from having had a violation. So, yes. That's why I just want to make the point that it's not like it's gone forever, and if there start to be issues, we couldn't reconstitute it.
Right. Everybody comfortable with that?
I would support both of the recommendations of staff.
Steve?
I think the fact that we've just gone through a spell of a very hot summer, and it was during the summer when the odors were in the previous year when they were the biggest problem. And the fact that there weren't any odor issues during this very hot summer, I think that I feel comfortable with not monitoring it unless the problem arose again.
Okay, Greg?
Just a quick question, just regarding, this is more for staff, but just this is regarding only the odor monitoring. Are other monitoring systems in place that will not change with this decision? I think this is only odor, as I understand it. And then I had another question just below this, below the discussion items. I've never seen this, so due to personal and other sensitive information being included in the applications, copies are only available at the clerk's office. Can you explain that?
Licenses must be accompanied with a schematic showing a floor plan, building improvement locations, and so forth, and embedded within that are security measures, which, as a consequence of the licensing procedure, are extensive. So it makes no sense whatsoever to just throw that out.
Post them on the internet.
In the ether.
Got it. Understood.
So there's that. As far as other monitoring, no. There was only the one issue to deal with, and this is the only monitoring that the county went outside of itself and sought the help of a consultant. The cost of that was paid for by Cooper Mason, and the monitoring that the county does is relatively strictly complaint driven, except for once a year staff goes and visits the properties or the facilities that are licensed. And in fact, I was on such a visit just a few weeks ago, and I have to comment that is one remarkably well run facility. It really is impressive, all things considered. So.
Thank you.
So it sounds like everyone is comfortable with not having to continue the monitoring of the odor. Patty's already spoken up on the other issue, which is whether or not to require a public hearing for future renewals of the license, or whether that process can be handled administratively, again, contingent upon no issues arising prior to the renewal.
Right.
Rachel?
Well, I would, again, kind of ask a question of our staff. When we talk about liquor license renewals, unless there's really a change of ownership or the partner's responsible for the license, we don't really see those every year either.
That's correct.
And, I would just state that we've been phasing this in as the law passed and allowed such activities, and so it's an opportunity. I think we were being as cautious as we could be going forward, and obviously, we did have some issues with odor the first several years or year and a half with this facility. So I think that's why that requirement was put in place. But given that the law was that marijuana should be regulated like alcohol, and I don't want to put additional requirements on this one applicant that we're not putting on other licensees now that the problems seem to be resolved, I would support the handling that administratively unless complaints are received.
Everybody comfortable with that? Okay.
So in light of that, I will make a motion to approve as requested by staff, to approve the applications, both for renewal of the licenses submitted by Cooper Mason Ventures LLC, or do we need to approve each license
No,
separately?
that will do it.
Okay.
Okay. And that is removing the requirement for the odor monitoring and removing.
Right, that's a given per the recommendation of staff. But, and then making sure that the process remains open for the public if issues do come up in the future.
Absolutely.
All right, so we have first, we have a second. I just want to acknowledge that, as Jordan said, that we're getting some substantial sales tax dollars that are going into the education,
I appreciate that.
into our schools, which is wonderful to hear. The other note I'll make is, because our next agenda item actually talks about our renewable energy mitigation program, and I know staff is continuing to look at the energy use, which is extraordinary high for your greenhouse operation. I think at some point we're going to be looking at, hopefully, how that's going to fall into our energy code and our climate action plan.
Great. I think Jordan will be on board with that in the future.
Absolutely.
So with that, no further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you both for coming.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
George, thank you. Thank you. It's a nice day when I can get
It's taking us a while to get there.
Greg, you have a standing invitation to come to our.
I'll come check it out.
It's
Thank you.
beautiful, yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Especially when you're in the greenhouses.
Do we need to have a stand-up break, Greg?
Yeah, I think it's time.
Stand up, sit down. Don't hit Rachel there.
Qigong. I can lead Qigong.
Okay.
All right, that was enough.
Maybe not, but we're going to keep rolling
Suzanne's
along.
like, what?
Okay, so now we're on to our individual consideration items. These are our second readings and are all public hearings. And the first is a resolution authorizing the Community Office for Resource Efficiency, CORE, to expend funds generated through the Renewable Energy Mitigation Program known as REMP.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Suzanne Wolf with Community Development for Cindy Hubin. This is the second reading of this resolution authorizing the expenditure of the REMP funds. I'm going to hand it over to Mona, who is much more knowledgeable than I am about this topic. So,
Thank you, commissioners and staff. Yes, we're here for our second reading of the resolution requesting our funding from the Renewable Energy Mitigation Program. And we've had our first reading with county commissioners. We have gone through the city council, the Aspen City Council, and this same resolution was approved unanimously by the entire city council. So now we're back to you for the final approval, the second reading here, of the resolution. So if you've seen it before, I'm happy to go over it or happy to take any additional questions that you might have.
Any questions?
I just have a comment.
Yes.
I think it's great that we've over the years have worked this process out, so we're getting it done in a very timely, critically timely for people who need to know if they have these grants to move forward. And the fact that we've been able to figure it out between city, one reading, county, two reading. So I really appreciate that. And I am more than happy to be moving this along at second reading and public hearing, right?
Is this a public hearing, right? Anybody wishing to make a comment on this? I'll keep the public hearing open through the next few agenda items. Any other comments? Or Steve?
My comment is I wish that we could give a higher percentage of what the different groups or different entities ask for on their projects. And I realize it's a very popular program and people are asking for a lot, but I was wondering if there was any, when the decision is being made by the core board on as to how much to support the different projects or how much money to put in, if there's any, if you give any consideration to if it's a public entity like the city of Aspen or Pickens County versus a nonprofit organization versus a for-profit kind of a company applying.
Well, fortunately, Marty is here, back from the dentist, and so Marty Treadway is our grants manager, and he heads up the Citizens Grant Review Committee that is the initial
makes the initial review of the grants.
But also, you might mention, Mona, that the REP dollars go far beyond just the true grants. They support a variety of programs, and you could touch on those really quickly just to re-educate for the public that the true grants are just one portion of the entire budget.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Steve, I'm happy to comment. I'm Marty Treadway with Grants Manager for CORE. And regarding your question about is there a bias toward municipalities as opposed to nonprofits or private business, there really are no criteria for the type of entity other than that they are one of those. They're municipal or they're a business or a nonprofit. So the criteria are listed on the website. They center around the energy savings potential, community benefit, educational benefit, those sorts of things. So we don't directly address whether it's a municipality or not at this time.
I do think that one of the pieces that we try to do is give everybody enough money so that the grant will go forward. What we've been told over the years is that these monies help leverage additional dollars. They'll, if they see, there's a core grant, that means that's solid money. Whether it was Compass, I think we awarded $75,000 to the community school. I get those two names mixed up. I can't remember if they're Compass or community school. Or for example, the St. Benedict's Monastery. It's like, this is enough. They'll be able to raise the rest of the money from their donors or their parishioners to make the projects work. So we don't want to give too little so that the project never moves forward, but we want to try to allocate the dollars. As George mentioned, we had, I think it was $2 million worth of grants this year, requests when you add them all up. So we're just trying to sort of figure out with our experience over the years, will this project be able to go forward? That's the other one of the criteria. Is this organization stable enough and likely to be able to see this project through to fruition so the money doesn't sit there? Because as you know, these are carbon offsets. We're trying to achieve some carbon offsets with that. So yeah. And as George mentioned, what we also use the funding for is the grants program. Thank you, Marty. The grants program, and then we have a good-sized rebate program that goes throughout the valley, and then we have a few what we call innovative programs, the community grants program, the Zero Energy Home Grant program, and the Energy Design Assistance grants, and then, of course, program delivery that supports this. So supported with the REMP dollars.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Mona, Suzanne, thank you for being here. I'm certainly interested in the Net Zero Homes Grant program, and as we move forward, I think that's going to become a larger topic, and more people will be speaking about it. I'm just wondering, what do you anticipate happening with that in the future? It looks like you have no funds requested for this coming year, but where are we going with that?
Yeah, Greg, thanks. This is Marty Treadway again. Great question. The Net Zero Grant has seen a lot of uptake in the first 2 years that we've been running it. But, of course, as we all know, construction projects do take time, and some of these homes are either they've been delayed or they're just still under construction. And so based on, even though an initial healthy application run, we had a balance available, so it didn't feel necessary to request funding for 2018. Having said that, I mean, as a retired builder in the Carbondale and Glenwood area anyway, I see the need for this only increasing. And, even recent conversations with the skiing company about the tiny house projects they like to do, they'd like to get those to as close to net zero as they can. And we're currently trying to figure out ways to leverage that grant program for some of those units. So I just think there's going to be a continued demand for homes that reach or achieve near net zero. So I expect to be back next year for some funding to continue that program.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about working with SKICO as a potential participant.
Rachel?
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to reaffirm something that should any of these individual projects not be moving forward for any sort of delay. The money's not released until you know it's really happening. And I'm just kind of keying off of the Snowmass Discovery Center, where I think they're getting the space built out, but they're not sure if they can fundraise or how they're going to actually operate it in the future. That seemed to be ACES evaluated and said they couldn't lead that capital campaign, and I would hate to see us just investing this money in a way that's a retail space, not a public space or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely, Rachel. Another great comment. And we don't, none of our grant programs offer the funding until the project has been completed. For the Net Zero Home, it's a certificate, a final certificate of occupancy and a final HERS rating. And similarly for the Discovery Center, as you mentioned, not only does the town have to commit to occupying it and finding a tenant for that space as the Discovery Center, but the project will need to be completed before funds will be released.
Okay, and I certainly hope they find lead donors in
Me
a large
too.
fundraising effort. Thank you.
Okay.
I would make a motion. Oh, or have you done the public hearing?
Oh, I have.
Okay. I would move to approve the resolution authorizing the Community Office of Resource Efficiency, CORE, to expend funds generated through the Renewable Energy Mitigation Program, REMP.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Great,
you.
Thank you for your support, and we'll look forward to another year of working on carbon emissions reduction. So.
And you heard my comments with the past agenda item in terms of looking at mitigation for huge greenhouses
Right.
in general.
Energy use fee.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do we need to schedule a work session on that? in
No,
the
staff
future,
is
or-
no, the staff is aware of that, and
Already
they're sort
working
of
on it.
plugging ahead with CORE.
Excellent. That's important stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Next is a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding between the Garfield County Clerk and Recorder's Office and the Pickens County Public Health Agency concerning vital statistics.
Yeah, I'm going to take both of Karen's items today. Everyone's busy today, it seems like. So
Jeez.
I know. So what is in front of you? This MOU previously existed with Community Health Services, as we've created our own public health department. We've been transferring these agreements for services that we've had with other entities to that department. And basically what this does is Garfield County currently provides both vital statistics, which is really birth and death certificate and records for the state. Garfield County is providing that service for both Rio Blanco County and Pickens County. So as the transition happened, the agreement was terminated with Community Health Services, and now we're reinitiating that agreement with our new public health department. Basically, there's no direct charge to us for providing that service. Garfield County collects the fees associated with the issuance of birth and death certificates. Those fees are set by CDPH, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And I believe they are $20 for the first copy and $13 for subsequent copies.
Thanks. Any questions for John, Patty?
There are no changes from first reading?
No changes from first reading.
This is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to comment on this? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. Steve?
One more question. It mentioned, looking through it, it mentioned the issuing of marriage licenses was the one that caught my eye. And then I started wondering if how much does Garfield County Clerk actually make in the fees, and does it cover their costs for providing this service to us? Or has anyone ever run the numbers on that?
I don't think those numbers have been run on our side. It's one of those situations where you just get some economies of scale that it's not, the volumes aren't such that Garfield County, I believe, is having to hire additional staff or such to provide those vital record services for Rio Blanco and Pickens County. It's fairly small volumes, I think, on both sides. We are providing marriage licenses in our clerk's office, so they're able to provide those
So
up
people
here.
could still come to get married at the clerk's office here?
All vital statistics, yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They're just going to record it down somewhere.
Yeah, and you'll hear, when we were in our old meeting room, you'd sometimes hear the ceremony taking place as soon as it was issued.
To make sure we could continue doing that, having
Yes.
the applause.
Yeah, no, this doesn't change that at all.
Okay.
Would you like a motion to
So,
approve?
if I could make the motion, I'd make a motion to approve the resolution approving the MOU between Garfield County Clerk and Recorder's Office and the Pickens County Public Health Agency concerning vital statistics.
I'll make a second, leave it open for public comment.
I already did that. So any further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, the next one that John is going to
I know it was open for public discussion, but did you ask for comments?
I did.
On this? Okay, I'm sorry.
Next is a resolution approving the memorandum of understanding between Pickens County and Garfield County regarding the utilization of the Healthy Communities Early and Periodic Screening, Diagnostic, and Treatment Program Family Health Coordinator.
I'm so glad you said that, George.
Oh, that's a mouthful.
We just call it EPSDT. Even the acronym's hard. So this is another agreement that we're switching over to our new public health department. And really what this program does is for Medicaid enrolled individuals age 20 and under. It provides really navigation services, case management, referral services for all kinds of both medical and other services such as child care providers, food and shelter programs, Part C programs. There's a number of things. Right now, that funding comes through CDPHE. Garfield County is providing the coordinator, who's Monica Cruz, and she does have hours regularly up here. Let's see, it looks like services are available 10 to 3:30 in Aspen through the family health coordinator, who's Monica Cruz, and that's managed through Garfield County. Again, another good partnership to leverage economies of scale in our region.
Any questions for John? This is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to comment on this? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
I do. Can I ask John a question? No changes?
Yeah.
No changes from the
Then
previous.
I would like to make a motion to approve on second reading.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is an ordinance authorizing the acceptance of a covenant agreement for the occupancy and resale of Lot 7, Block 1, Meadowwood Subdivision, filing 1-130 Primrose Path. This is relating to employee housing mitigation fees.
Suzanne Wolf for Community Development. This is a second reading. Acceptance of the covenant agreement. I think you've seen a few of these now, where you're accepting the covenant where someone is able to pay a lesser fee as a resident occupied unit as opposed to a second home. And that's the fee for employee housing, the employee housing impact fee. So when that happens, they're required to record a covenant restricting the use of the property for resident occupancy. And if that changes in the future, at that point, they're required to pay the higher fee.
And we did discuss at first reading the need to get onto a work session agenda item to revisit the housing mitigation fee, and also I think the definition of a Pickens County resident.
Yep, good point.
Any questions for Suzanne on this? Is this a public hearing? Anybody wishing to make a comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Again, based on no changes, I will make a motion to approve on second reading.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thanks, Suzanne. Let's see. Next is an ordinance authorizing the county manager and county attorney to execute the instruments necessary to commit appropriated funding in order to add to the Pickens County Employee Deed Restricted Housing Program inventory.
he left.
He walked out of the room.
Kara Silbernagle with County Manager's Office. So before you is the deed restricted program for county employees, and basically this ordinance gives approval to county manager and county attorney to approve any purchases that come before them to a form that is substantially similar to what is attached to the packet before you today.
And you did note there are some modifications.
Yes, so there was a couple added language. This has been the drafting of this guidelines and ordinance has been under review for quite some time. So we missed some of the updates that the county attorney's office has added to their typical language. So those were included in the general guidelines or in the general provisions to the covenant. And then based on the conversation during first reading, added language to the guidelines that allows employees to rent under a leave of absence, and that leave of absence must be approved by the Human Resources and the county manager in order to get that leave of absence rental approved, and then just clarified that the approval authority is a form that is substantially similar to the ordinance. Same.
Patty?
Yeah, and again, I think it's important that since this is a new program, that at some point in this next year or so that it gets brought back to us so we know how successful it is, and if we need to look at further funding maybe for next year, and if there's any issues that we need to be talking about or maybe need to address and amend.
Yeah.
I think that's critical for a new program, and I'm excited, and I know we have staff members who are excited, and we know how critical and scarce affordable housing is in this valley, and I think this will help us to recruit and retain key people or any level of staff that's interested in the program. So, Kara, you put in a lot of work on this, as have other members who should be sitting there with you, so we wish to thank all of them.
Yes, and it'll feel good when we see some employees in housing and
great.
Not afraid to lose anyone. So
yeah.
The question I have is under the budgetary impact, the BOCC appropriated $1 million from the housing fund and $1 million from the airport fund. That $1 million from the airport fund, are we looking at reallocating that for just a different type of purpose for employee housing?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's
yes.
under consideration.
Well, it'll be used for acquisition of individual units, as actually I think works right now.
Right.
And also this program.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it comes up.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a public hearing. Anybody wish to make any comments on this? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. Steve?
I would like to have our board informed when an employee does complete a transaction, and this, I think that would be a good way for us to just realize the program's working and that, employees are being successful in securing the housing they want. So for that, I don't know what mechanism we would have for.
Well, just by asking for it.
That's all the mechanism you
Yep.
need. I
And
think
we've asked for that.
the purpose of the ordinance is to allow it to go forward without having to come back to the board for individual ordinances for every acquisition. However, an informal update at a work session or something like that can be done continually, and that would allow the board to appreciate the successes and analyze where improvements might be made and adjust the program continually or however frequently the board wants to.
Yeah, and maybe it could just be part of a regular checkup on our affordable housing program and check up on how we were doing on employee retention and those sorts of things. That would be a time we could talk about this, the success of this also.
Well, I have no doubt going through budget season there will probably be some report outs on this program too. So maybe that's the first step.
Perfect.
I'd make a motion to approve this ordinance authorizing county manager and attorney to execute the instruments necessary to commit appropriated funding in order to add to the Pitkin County Employee Deed Restricted Housing Program inventory.
Second.
Any further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye.
Again, Kara.
Aye. Thank you, and I'm going to close the public hearing at this point. And we're going to move on to emergency
Not moving.
ordinance, and resolution confirmatory reading. And the first is an emergency ordinance authorizing the board to enter into a communications use lease with the U.S. Department of Agricultural Forest Service for the Elephant Mountain Communications Site.
So I'm back.
Oh, you're still here.
Missed you. So this is as part of our public safety and broadband microwave loop. This was is one of the key sites into it, and so it's a lease with the Forest Service for Elephant Mountain. It's an emergency lease, partially just because of trying to before we can get work done, we need Pitkin County to sign it, as well as for the U.S. Forest Service White River District to sign on. So just trying to get all the signatures so that we can get some of the work started this year. We won't have the project complete by 2018, but it at least allows us to go up and start looking at different foundations and rock anchors and all that technical stuff to start the project, with the anticipation to have it complete in 2018.
I had a comment from a constituent in an email, and I don't know if it was related to the Elephant Hill, but it came from Redstone, and saying that he was for some reason losing or not getting any longer some of the TV stations off of the translator site.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's tied into what's happening at Elephant Hill or not.
So what we will be doing long term, once the new site is up, we'll also be putting in IP TV translator systems. So right now they're all old, and so anytime it goes down, we don't have the ability to know when it's down unless we're at the site. So when the new site's up, we're also upgrading all the translator equipment so that the communications team will be able to monitor when it goes down and the source of if it's going down from Elephant or Sunlight remotely. So if that's down, we can check into it. I know that there's an outage. I just can't recall where it is on our website for those that have internet. But specifically with TV in the Crystal River Valley, it can be a source of either from Sunlight, because Sunlight feeds Elephant, or it could be Elephant. So we can look into that.
Okay, great, thanks. I'll pass that on to you and to Jeff. Any other questions for Kara?
So I'd move to approve the emergency ordinance authorizing the board to enter into the communication use lease with the United States Forest Service for the Elephant Mountain Communication Site.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thanks, Kara.
Thank you.
Thanks for the good work.
Thank you. Keep it rolling.
Next is an emergency resolution. It's a confirmatory reading to approve an intergovernmental agreement with the Aspen School District Preserving Safe and Stable Families Grant.
And Kim is still here?
Thank you.
This is it.
Oh, we're going to miss you. Thank you so much for all the work you've done for Pitkin County.
Thank you. I'm going to miss being here, for sure. I actually invited Catherine Sands, who is the director of the Aspen Family Connections, to join me today.
Nice to see you again,
Hello, everybody. Yes, nice to see you again, too. This is the Promoting Safe and Stable Families grant that we presented on August 23rd, and we required an intergovernmental agreement with the school board to release those funds, and so we did this as an emergency resolution. And today this is set for confirmatory hearing. The school board did get their information, or the IGA approved at their last board meeting, which was, I think, about a week ago. Catherine Sands is the director of the Aspen Family Connections, which is housed in the school, and so that's why she's here today. And we're really thrilled about being able to provide some more supports and services for families in the school setting and outside of the school setting, but a logical place for them to get services is within that environment.
Patty?
Yeah, I want to thank Catherine. She just did a great presentation at the Aspen Chamber Resort Association board meeting. It was great. It was great information to get out because most of the people in that room were not familiar with this program. You did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and it was a great meeting, and it was perfect timing. So it was fun for me to be at that meeting and know what you were going to be talking about. So thank you for doing that.
Thanks very much, Patty. That's great.
Any other questions for Catherine or for Kim?
I will make a motion to approve on confirmatory reading the resolution for approval of the intergovernmental agreement between Pitkin County and the Aspen School District.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Steve? I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Kim for your many years of devoted work for Pitkin County and for the people of Pitkin County. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
And we will miss having you around here.
Thank you. I really appreciate working.
And you can come back and visit anytime.
I will.
Your going away party is tonight at the Riverside Grill. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what time is that?
I think it's at 4:30.
Onwards.
4:30? What is it?
4:30 to 7.
To 7, yeah.
Till 7, okay.
This is not a surprise party then, is it?
No, she doesn't like surprises.
The time is a surprise.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure we'll make it based on the rest of our agenda, but continue to thank you and appreciate
Well, these
your
guys
service.
might be able to stop in on their way home.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Good luck
you.
to you.
Let's see.
Thank you.
Okay.
We had a motion, we had a
Need a
second.
Oh, we had a motion and a second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now you may leave.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, last is an emergency resolution authorizing a prohibition on electric bikes on the Pitkin County trails.
Good afternoon. Richard Neely, Assistant County Attorney. I'm not sure if I made it on the agenda today. This was originally Laura's item, but she is at a DHS hearing this afternoon. So here I am. And this is the confirmatory reading, the emergency ordinance prohibiting electric bicycles on the Pitkin County open space and trails, specifically the Rio Grande. This one is different from the emergency order, from the first reading, in that it includes the basically the sunsetting of the ordinance on May 1st, 2018, which was a request that was made at the time. Open space and trails, my understanding, is continuing to work with other local governmental agencies, including RAFTA and Garfield County, to coordinate the use of electric bikes throughout the valley. So,
and the city of Aspen Open Space and Trails as well. So they're going to I think Pitkin County Open Space and Trails will probably take the lead on this in terms of bringing these entities together and having an open and public process with all the stakeholders involved.
Yeah, George, there's a meeting, I believe, this week with staff from RAFTA and Open Space and Trails to kind of determine who's going to take lead, and then we will convene interested parties, including the City of Aspen, Snowmass Village, RAFTA, and it sounds like the Forest Service might have an interest in being part of our conversations too.
Yeah, great. Patty?
Yeah, well, I think the specifics for me that were important, of course, was public safety, the speed issue, and you hear about some accidents that have happened already. This is definitely the talk of the town. You go anywhere, people are now showing off their electric bikes at all different levels. I saw a camouflaged one down at Factory Surplus, and the guy who was trying to sell it didn't know if it was a 1, 2, or 3, and I said, you don't even know what the issues are behind this electric bike. But it's really, there's big sporting events that, sporting shows, equipment shows that are featuring these bikes. So I think it's timely that we're jumping on this. The other issue, I would like to see some of the technological stuff come back so that the board, the commissioners, is well versed also in the issues between the level 1, 2, and 3 bikes. But I'm really supportive of this. I think the time frame of May 1st it works perfectly with the seasonality of our trails use.
Yeah, and again, this is not new. The motorized vehicles have always been prohibited on Pitkin County trails, but this came to us because of the governor's newest bill, or stating that Class 1 and Class 2 electric bikes may be utilized on on public trails, bike trails.
Throughout
And
the
so-
state.
Throughout the state. So because of that, we just want to make sure that our original prohibition on motorized vehicles covers that new Class 1 and Class 2 bikes until we have time to really have, again, an open and public process. Steve?
Yeah, there's a little bit of gray area in some of the wording, and it has to do with the definition of what a trail in Pickens County is. And in 4 different places in there, in Section 6, it mentions the state statute, mentions a bike or pedestrian path under its jurisdiction. Then in Section 9, it mentions trails and paths within Pickens County. Section 10, it mentions on any trail or path within Pickens County, which I would take that to mean any private trail on our ranch would be included in that just by the way it's worded. And then in the be it ordained, it mentions prohibited on all Pickens County trails and paths. So the wording is contradictory, and I know we know what our intent of it is, but I want to make sure we're not passing something that would prohibit, make it unlawful for somebody to be on their own private trail on their own property.
Yeah, that's a good catch, Steve. I'm just wondering if inserting the word public after the word any in each of these instances would do it, so that any public trail or path within Pickens County, and
Any public trail or path.
just put that throughout the resolution would clarify. But that's a
I'm
very good catch.
Yeah, either that or perhaps I thought maybe we could say all trails and paths under the jurisdiction of Pickens County, which is sort of the wording in the state statute, just to make it consistent on the wording.
And John Ely, that will work?
Right?
So we can.
And I'd be okay with leaving it up with the attorney's office to come up with the exact wording on those, just to make them consistent.
Sure, your point's well taken, Steve. We'll make sure that gets taken care of.
All right, great, thank you.
Good catch, Steve.
Any other questions or comments? Steve?
So, well, I'll move to approve an emergency ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County prohibiting electric bikes on Pickens County trails with the amended words on definition of what trails this is referring to.
Do I have a
I'll
second? Second, okay.
Yeah,
comments?
I just would like to add a footnote to request that we get some sort of progress reports on how reviewing this and creating new statutes or guidelines are occurring before the May 1st expiration. Sometimes we will say things at the table and we're going to work on something and have it ready by X day, and it kind of can slip the schedule. And so I wanted to make sure we just put that footnote out there that we really do want to be ready with a clear direction for the public by May 1st. Thank you.
Yeah, because we'll have to amend the bylaws and stuff probably for open space.
Yeah.
And we'll be entering in a public process regarding electric mobility, bicycles or whatever. It's such a popular thing. It's like the invention of the bicycle, or as disruptive as the invention of the iPhone. This is something that's here to stay, and I think we're going to be bumping up against it, and it's a very popular topic. And I'm hoping that we also move forward on understanding how we're going to be integrating these electric vehicles of any type into our transportation, and that we're not trying to discourage it completely. What we're trying to do is get a handle on it before it gets away from us. And I think part of that process that we're going to begin is also going to be looking at just the crowding on our trails. I think, for instance, with Rio Grande Trail, we have the issues with regular bikes, mountain bikes, road bikers, and hikers, and there's a lot of conflict already. So certainly adding electric to that would be a mistake, I think. But we also need to address those problems, pre-electric bike issues on these paths, whether it's striping or speed limits or whatever. And I look forward to that process and want to encourage the public that we're not just creating this ban and walking away from it.
And it should be noted, this ban does not impact or change the ability for any impaired or disabled people.
ADA compliance.
ADA compliance, right. Okay, any other further comments? Let's see, we had a motion, we had a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Ray.
So let's take a 15-minute break. It's 1:40.
Yeah. Okay.
Back around 1:55. Hearings. This is the 501 Buttermilk LLC, the Sky Beam subdivision. It was continued from the first reading from September 13th. And there's two parts to this. One is an ordinance rezoning 501 Buttermilk LLC, the Sky Beam property, with a planned unit development. That was continued from the first reading of September 13th. And then the second is a resolution approving the Sky Beam subdivision PUD conceptual submission and activity envelope, again continued first reading from September 13th.
No, they were continued from July 12th to September 13th.
Today is September 13th. Thank you, Patty.
It was written wrong.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mike Kramer with Pickens County Planning Staff, and the applicant is 501 Buttermilk LLC, and the applicant has chosen the name of Sky Beam Subdivision for this request, and they're requesting conceptual subdivision, PUD approval, which is planned unit development, rezoning to that overlay, and then activity envelope review. And as you said, George, this is a continued first reading from July 12th. Mitch Haas is sitting next to me from Haas Land Planning, and we have a vicinity map up on the screen showing the subject parcel located at 501 West Buttermilk Road. George, there's quite a bit of history of it, and we all went through that in July 12th. I'm not sure if the board wants me to revisit that history or go through any previous approvals or things that happened on the property with the staff presentation.
Why don't you just give us a high points? Bullet points.
Bullet points.
And then if there are any questions, certainly we could fill in the gaps, but just to sort of refresh our memories and what we're trying to accomplish today.
Okay. I'll give request and process, and if the board would like to go into the history, we can do that too. So the request is to subdivide the subject parcel, which is 37 acres, into two lots. Lot 1 would contain the existing single-family residence, which is about 7,000 square feet in size. And that Lot 1 is 31 acres in size. With this proposal is a 26.6 acre conservation easement that is proposed to be held by Open Space and Trails. Lot 2, which is 5.3 acres, is proposed to have a 10,750 square foot residence, and I'll get into the amended request here in a second. With this request, the applicant is also proposing a planned unit development. That acronym is PUD, and that acronym gets thrown out a lot, but what it means in the scope of Pickens County is that when someone is proposing a subdivision, there is the ability to vary lot sizes and setbacks and things that are applicable to that zone district. This is zoned AR10, agricultural residential 10-acre zoning. With a 37-acre lot size, the applicant would have the ability to request 3 separate parcels with this application. They've only requested 2 lots with this request. Part of the request is that they want to donate a 26-acre conservation easement to Open Space and Trails, and in doing so, they would like to reduce the lot size on Lot 2 to 5.3 acres. Now, we completely acknowledge that that's less than the 10-acre minimum lot size, but through the PUD process, an applicant can request to establish a lesser lot size in order to accomplish things like open space. So this is the appropriate request and review procedure for something like this. And with that, you're seeing an ordinance, a draft ordinance in front of you too. The code requires that if a PUD is approved, the actual overlay of the PUD be applied to the property. The zone district essentially would not change, except that it would be overlaid with a PUD that acknowledges Lot 2 is less than 5.3 acres. So that's that portion of the request. The applicant's requesting activity envelope, and Mitch has got his presentation, I think, that he's going to want to get through, and he'll show you lot lines and where activity envelopes are proposed. Part of the initial request too was growth management quota systems, GMQS, and there are two procedures in Pickens County for an applicant to attain a development right. One is for an applicant to purchase a TDR and attempt to apply it to a newly created lot. That's one way. The second way is to also apply for a GMQS allotment, and the applicant has chosen the latter. They've applied through the GMQS process, and the P&Z has granted that allotment, and the board's acknowledged it with their resolution a few months back. And we'll get into the details of that too in the staff memo. So that's basically the request. And at the last BOCC meeting, on page 2 of the staff memo, I tried to bullet point some of the things that the board asked us to look into. And one of those was that there was concern that 10,750 square feet of house size on Lot 2 just may be too large for the neighborhood. And the applicant and staff have gone through some of the existing house sizes in the West Buttermilk area. And as you get closer to the West Buttermilk ski area, there are quite larger houses up there, up to 15,000 square feet. And on the lower part of the hillside, as you're traversing up West Buttermilk, there are much smaller houses. That range from 2,700 square feet to about 8,500. The average, as the applicant has indicated, is 4,800 square feet for the average on that portion of Pickens County. So 10,750 square feet is generally not consistent with the neighborhood. So that's one thing that we looked into. The applicant has requested, I'm sorry, I'll go to the second bullet point. Without the benefit of the site plan, proposed 10,750 square foot residence may be too large for the proposed building site. The applicant's going to get into the size of Lot 2 and the size of the activity envelope, but I'd like to point out that the code does not require the applicant to put together a site plan for this request. They can do so and request a subdivision without drawing a house and showing all the ancillary development that goes with it. So we don't have the benefit of that, and we can't see what the house would look like at this time. Could the BOCC require the applicant to use TDRs for the proposed development in lieu of a GMQS allotment? At this time, the code doesn't establish a preference for either. It's up to the applicant if they want to apply for a TDR and land it on the property for the development right, or compete in growth management, and obviously the applicant has chosen to compete in growth management. The last is the ability for the Board of County Commissioners to reduce the approved 10,750 square foot GMQS allotment. And as you can see in the staff memo on page 3, we have an opinion from the County Attorney's Office, and we'll let them explain that portion of it. So that was the gist of the last meeting on July 12th. The applicant, in addition, has amended their application, and they provided that, and it's in your staff memo and packet. And what they're willing to do and offer voluntarily is to reduce the floor area for the subject property. And what the applicant is proposing to do is to start parceling out where this floor area would go and make a commitment to a reduction in the overall size. And the applicant is committing to 5,750 square feet of floor area above grade. And that includes garages or carports or outbuildings. They're also committing to use 4,000 square feet as true basement subgrade space as defined by the Pickens County Land Use Code. That leaves a balance of 1,000 square feet left over from the 10,750 square foot allotment, and they're willing to forego that amount. So effectively, 9,750 square feet of gross floor area, so above grade and below grade, would be offered as a commitment by the applicant. Staff has no opposition to that. That's about all I have for the staff memo, and we're recommending approval for the rezone ordinance and the resolution that we've drafted.
Good summary and background. Thanks, Mike. Any questions for staff?
Yeah.
Yes, Rachel.
Yeah, a couple of questions, and thanks for the thorough memo. Going into this, I have my older packet from the first meeting. What would the lot size of the current lot be right now without subdivision? It's basically the full 37 acres?
That's correct.
Okay. And if this were to go forward, what would the lot size of the original fathering parcel be?
You mean where the existing house is?
Yeah, where the existing house is.
Okay. So that's identified as a fathering parcel, like you said, in Lot 1. And that size is 31 acres.
Okay, so if the subdivision goes forward, it would be 31 acres? I'm saying if the subdivision goes forward, the first fathering parcel will remain at 31 acres.
That's correct. If the line gets drawn in the subdivision, Lot 1 would contain 31 acres, and of which 26 acres would be the conservation easement.
Okay, and then the new lot would be the 5 point something or other?
That's correct.
Okay. And then perhaps we could dive in a little, again, on the current existing lot. And given its activity envelope, what benefit going forward does adding a conservation easement do to the rest of that property? It's my understanding you really can't disturb vegetation outside of your activity envelope, that further buildings are not allowed outside of your activity. So what is the essence of the value that is being forward of the conservation easement that says, hey, you should vary a lot of other things in this PUD?
I think it's twofold, and I think the applicant can probably advocate for his position on that. But from a county standpoint, the 26.6 acre conservation easement is what originally was proposed, more or less, with the 1999 conservation easement that the city of Aspen attempted to place on the property. So that's one thing to note. The second is that there would be the ability for no further subdivision with an easement on the property.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve?
Mike, the issue's been raised by some people about the distance of the proposed new house from the road, the private road. And I was curious, what would be, if this were a public road, what would be the setback requirement for the building envelope to the road?
I don't think I can adequately answer that. There's a couple different setbacks from what the land use code identifies as collector streets and major roads. And a collector street has a certain setback from it, and a major road has a certain setback from it. State Highway 82 also has a certain setback from it, so I don't know what we would classify that as. But I could say if it was either a collector street or a major road, there would be a certain setback. I just don't know what it would be because it doesn't exist in the code.
And do you know if on the private road, do they have any setback requirements on the West Buttermilk Road?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions for staff at this time? Rachel?
Well, yeah, I guess I would like to drill down a little, as Mike referenced. He asked the county attorney on some information for us, and then there's a little bit of a description of those in the packet. And John, I'm wondering if you wanted to either state that for the record or re-elaborate, but I will read the tail end of that advice. More simply put, if the board denies the subdivision application, no legally created separate parcel would exist on which to apply the GMQS allotment. And so I'm wondering, if we were to deny this, where does that leave the property owner? They could come in with a new application for subdivision and PUD and have it changed up a little, or could they come in for an application to divide this into 3 lots? And again, the county would have to look at the appropriateness of that. Or
Yes, to both of those.
Okay.
Leaves the door open.
For a different application, you can always,
Microphone, please.
Whoop.
always reconfigure an existing application. The one thing that they will be able to do is always rely upon the GMQS allocation.
Okay, so that if they were to come in with a new application to subdivide into 3 parcels, no conservation easement, and they have 10,700 square feet, they could divide among those 2 new parcels, essentially?
I'm not sure how the allocation from the P&Z was
Would affect too.
was specified. There wasn't a written resolution of the P&Z, so I don't believe they could split the allocation up. But I'm not sure. I think the allocation was addressed to the property as a whole. So, theoretically, then you could divide it up into multiple lots.
Thank you.
Well, one of the concerns from last time was the process that P&Z used, and we questioned some of the way they derived the GMQS through the point system, and so we had a fairly long discussion on that, and this memo sort of alludes to that, and I just wonder if the board wants to dive down a little bit deeper on this. Perhaps we might want to go into exec session.
For me, the issue was, when we talked about GMQS, how could the Board of Commissioners now change that GMQS allocation? Could we say, we're only going to give you 4,000 out of the 10,000 you were allocated, or we're going to repeal all of the GMQS allocation? I think that was kind of the basis of our discussion. What were the legal parameters for the board to do at this point in this application as far as the GMQS that was already approved and granted? And I think that, to me, was the issue. I don't see that as the issue now with what the applicant is presenting to us. It's the applicant's choice not to use all of their allocated GMQS square footage. That's what they're presenting to us now. So that's really in their hands now. I don't think it's in ours. I think for me, in our hands now is, unless we determine we want less square footage than what is currently being asked for.
Right, exactly. That was the point of discussion. So if that's a concern, we may want to consider a short exec session just to clarify with our attorneys
what parameters we have as far as addressing GMQS.
I'd like to understand this better. It makes sense to me.
Okay, so
I have one more question
Yes.
for Mike. Having to do with subgrade space in
We're going to need a space.
this area. It's part of the Aspen urban growth boundary, and let's just do a hypothetical. If someone was going to build a 5,750 square foot house on a lot, they would be allowed to do a 4,000 square foot subgrade space because they're in the urban growth boundary?
Close.
Or something. What is the rule on that?
Yep. So the rule in the land use code is that if the property has a zoning district that has a floor area ratio, an FAR, and they're located within the UGB, the urban growth boundary, they are afforded the ability to build a 4,000 square foot subgrade space. Now, this property does not have a floor area ratio because it's zoned AR10, so it's got standard 5750 zoning on it. So it would not be exempted space, and that's why the applicant is acknowledging this in their growth management allotment and how it would be used.
Okay.
So it's not exempt, but they got that allocation through GMQS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if anyone's interested, I would entertain a motion to go into exec session.
Yeah, George, I'd like to do that and honor that request. I'm just wondering, does it make more sense to do it now or after we hear Mitch's presentation?
I would do it now, just so we're clear in terms of.
I don't think it's going to make any. I think.
Okay. Well, I would make a motion to go into executive session for advice from our attorney.
Second.
And that is pursuant to CRS-24-6-4024B. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
I just asked.
You guys can stay here. We'll just find a room, and
I just asked John Peacock to get us a room.
be back shortly. All right, I would accept the motion to go out of exec session.
So move.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any other further questions for staff at this point?
Not for me.
If not, we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome back. My name's Mitch Haas. I'm here representing 501 Buttermilk LLC. I think hopefully everybody remembers decently well what we discussed back in July, and I don't really want to rehash all of that. I think we'd gone through the history of this property pretty extensively at that point with regard to the conservation easement, not conservation easement, annexation, all of those past issues. But if you need me to go back through any of that, I'm happy to. Unless I was grossly misreading what I was hearing at that hearing, it seemed like the biggest issue was the appropriateness of the house size on the parcel size that we were proposing for most of the members of the board. Not to say there weren't any other concerns, but that seemed to be the overriding concern. A lot of discussion about possibly 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag. Largely, I think what we were talking about there was the visible mass of the home, of an 8,250 square foot above grade home as compared with what is around it. So we took that to heart and we went back and, my client being who he is and the way he's approached this entire process with trying to adjust to concerns as they've arisen, rather than trying to forecast them before we know what they necessarily are. As things have come up throughout this whole process, we've revised the proposal to address every concern that we've heard to date. And so that brought us to looking at, are we really that incompatible with the surrounding homes and the surrounding character? So we took it upon ourselves then to go back and do a little studying of it. So what I had done is, and so you could see it's a little fuzzy up there, at least with my eyesight. There's blue stars on a lot of these lots. We studied the lots, our existing lot, and then all the ones that are immediately adjacent to us in Aspen Oaks and very proximate, and looked at what the lot sizes were and looked at the built square footage as well as the allowable square footage. It turned out of the 12 immediately adjacent lots, our lot being the 13th, of the 12 immediately adjacent lots, we found an average lot size of...
Lot size or house size?
I'm going to start with lot size. An average lot size of 5.056 acres. And they really didn't vary a whole lot from that. It wasn't like there was a real high one, a big one, and a real small one, and the average came out there. They're really all right around 5 acres, almost on the nose. And so we looked at that and said, our proposal for a lot size of 5.34 is right on the mark with what's around us. So from there, we went on to say, okay, so the 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag, the 5-pound bag is right on. It's the same size bag as everybody around us. And then, so with that bag, what's in it on each of these lots? And Mike touched on, what our findings were, which were a pretty good range of built square footage. The best I could do was pull up the assessor's records and look at built square footage, but knowing that where we are in the county and in the zone district, all square footage counts as FAR anyway. So garage, accessory building, house, it's all the same. So we're able to add those things up and come up with what we were finding was the range was approximately from about 2,800 square feet up to about 8,500 square feet built. Now with that built, every single one of these lots is allowed by right, no need for TDRs or growth management. Every single one of them is allowed to build 5,750 square feet above grade. So we said, all right, clearly the average house, given the range, what we looked at, the average of what's already built is a little over 4,800, 4,826 is the number I came up with. But could all be expanded up to 5,750 by right with a site plan review. So we said, well, yeah, okay, we were at 8,250 plus 2,500 below ground. We're not going to disagree. That's not compatible with the neighborhood. It'd be taking, because as you move a little further up the hill, so you see our lots that are starred, you go uphill more or to the left on this map. The home sizes start increasing dramatically as you move further up West Buttermilk Road, up into the upper portion of Aspen Oaks and West Buttermilk Road. Homes start getting to dramatically larger, up to 15,000 square feet, some even bigger when you go further up West Buttermilk Road. And we felt like, in the spirit of the way we've been approaching this whole process, we don't want to be the ones to, if not initiate, continue the creep of the larger homes down to the valley floor. So we said, well, we have a 10,750 square foot allocation with 8,250 of that above ground. And we recognize that it's not something that can be appealed at this point or changed, but that's not really the point. We want to do the right thing, what seems like a logical, correct number to go with. And we felt like the big concern was character, which is what you see, I think, more than what's below ground, bulk and mass, visible bulk and mass. So we said we'll limit it to the same 5,750 above ground as everyone around us has a right to do. And since we already have this allocation, why then have to go buy TDRs for the subgrade space? Which, by the way, everybody around us can also buy TDRs for 4,000 square feet of subgrade space, and that is not subject to special review because it's inside the urban growth boundary. So we said, all right, we'll leave the 4,000 below ground, so we left ourselves with up to 5,750 above ground, up to 4,000 below, essentially forfeiting 1,000 square feet altogether, and really cutting the above ground visible mass square footage down to less than 70% of what's already been approved. The hope was that this really did address the concern with visible bulk and mass and what that means for neighborhood character and compatibility with what's around us. With that, we said, all right, so we're not going to start saying, all right, we took off a bunch off the table of what we were approved for. Maybe we don't need to give all the same commitments we already did. We said, we're still good on that. We went into this in good faith, and we're going to honor all of our prior commitments that we were willing to make. So we're still talking about leaving the conservation easement in place, providing the trail easements if desired. If they're not desired, then we don't need to provide them. Providing the same $35,000 to go towards building the trail, the final link of single track trail from Aspen to Sky Mountain Park along the bottom of Buttermilk, continuing to do the landscaping improvements we committed to, continuing to restore habitat and remove noxious weeds from the entire 37 acres. What other commitments? We committed to lowering our height some to allay one next door neighbor's concerns. We committed to capping and abandoning a well to allay the concerns of a different next door neighbor. We committed to all kinds of water conservation measures that were never required, but were aimed at making the metro district more comfortable. So all of that is still part of the proposal and would still be commitments that run with the land. And with that, again, is a 26.74, 20.75 acre conservation easement with a commitment to no further subdivision ever and no more than just the 2 single family homes, no third homes. Things that clearly the neighborhood wanted, maybe expected, but never were realized, but that we can now put in stone and make it obvious and a commitment that nobody can change. So that's the gist of where we are. So again, the only thing different from the presentation last time here is we discovered our average lot size right around us is 5.056 acres, which is right in line with us. Again, that is our activity envelope. The activity envelope size is 47,916 square feet, a little bit over an acre. More than adequate to accommodate a building footprint of 5,750 square feet, and that would be the footprint size if it's all on one floor. So we have no concerns with being able to fit it in here. We recognize, and I'll go ahead and state it on the record that we recognize that eventual development here would be subject to a site plan review, including scenic review. And if we have to drop heights or move things around to make it work for that, that's what we'll have to do. But it's the same site plan review requirement as every other lot around us. And we don't feel like this lot's more visible than most of the other ones near us. But we'll figure that out at site plan review. We have not been trying to avoid showing anything. It'd just be sheer craziness to have designed a house already without knowing that we have a lot. And even if we had designed a house, we'd have had to redesign it 3 times already just in this review process, because it would have been 10,750 square feet, then 8,250, now 5,750. So yeah, no one in their right mind would do that until they know they have a lot and an approval to work with. And so we're being transparent there and know we have that process if the lot gets approved and when that time comes. What else was there to mention? So the conservation easement is 72% of the total property. I think that's a significant amount. And like I said, the square footage above ground we're talking about now is less than 70% of the allocation that was granted. One of the questions was, what's the benefit of this conservation easement as opposed to the existing activity envelope? I think Mike did a good job there addressing one, the conservation easement precludes further subdivision as well and protects all of that land. The existing activity envelope, just like any activity envelope, could be amended and usually happens as a staff review and wouldn't typically come in front of a board. So I think we're protecting against that. And what we're doing here with our envelope, because you could see on that plan lightly, there's a dotted line around the existing development on the top. What we're doing is clustering development here. We're putting the 2 homes really as practically close together as we can get them on these sites. And that enables the preservation of the 26.75 or 20.74 acres in conservation. And that is the one and only reason for the PUD request. We are not asking to vary setbacks or floor area or lot coverage or any of those requirements. We're simply asking for a smaller lot size to enable maximum land preservation and maximum clustering of development on the parcels. And that has become a commonplace, almost typical tool of subdivisions in Pickens County, is to vary the lot sizes via PUD so that you can cluster things, so you don't have to be 10 acres apart. And that's the only reason for that request in this particular case. Could we have come up with a different way of laying things out and spreading it out and pulling a driveway around behind the existing house? Yeah, we could have, and we could have complied with the Chapter 7 regulations in doing so. We don't have slopes that are that steep along the, east side of the existing home that we couldn't get around there. But we knew that wouldn't be appropriate and wouldn't work with the neighborhood or neighbors. So we tried at every stage of this process to be as sensitive as we could and ruffle as few feathers as possible. No one's perfect, so of course we got a few things wrong, and we've tried to adjust and correct those as we've gone. And hopefully we've gotten there at this point. I don't know. That's up to you, obviously. But that's where we stand now, and I'm happy to go back through any of the old history and the background from last time to the extent you want me to or don't remember. But otherwise, I assume you'd like to move along and not listen to me ramble on anymore.
Thanks, Mitch. Any questions for the applicant at this point? I'm going to open this up for public hearing. Anybody wishing to make a comment on this? Yeah, please, just come up to the mic and identify yourself. And
good afternoon. My name is Eric Gross. I'm with Whitston Gross Attorneys in Carbondale. We represent Joyce Amico and Charles Malcolmus, who are the owners at 477 Aspen Oak Drive. And they're adjacent to the application here before you.
Somewhere.
And specifically, Joyce and Charles couldn't be here. They asked me to just come and address the trail easement issue only. Just to limit it to that, they have concern about the requirement in the draft conditions number 4 that would require a trail easement to be provided as part of a subdivision plat. They support the concept of a conservation easement. It's within the spirit of the prior attempt by the city of Aspen to provide one, which was to be for the benefit of the Aspen Oak subdivision. And in that that easement, which wasn't functional, and I know it's in your packet, there's the hope was that the neighborhood of the Aspen Oak owners could manage that conservation easement and the uses in there so that they would be compatible with that neighborhood and with the common area that's adjacent and the uses there. And because of the unfortunate issues with that conservation easement, they're unable to do that. And with this new conservation easement, there's hope and there's a positive feeling that there's going to be no further subdivision, which is great, but no oversight by the Aspen Oak neighborhood as previously considered or conceived in that other easement. So I understand in speaking to staff today and the applicant that there's concerns about having the ability to have a trail easement in this location from wildlife officials and from the Aspen Valley Land Trust. Our clients would like to echo those concerns and to oppose that. The concept of this board requiring at this time a easement to be part of the subdivision plat. And if the board is going to entertain the concept of doing that, we would ask that you consider adding to this condition that the Aspen Oaks neighbors are given a notice of when the Open Space and Trails Commission would actually be reviewing the conservation easement and the trail easement, because that could occur without, because of the nature of that type informality and public hearing. It wouldn't be a public hearing as far as I could see from how this is drafted. We could perceive or conceive that maybe that part of the next step would happen without the Aspen Oak owners knowing until it came in for subdivision plat, at which time some of these things would have already been looked at. And I think it would be a great time for the neighborhood to be able to get involved early on and be able to work with the Trails Committee and their own neighborhood group to assess that application on how that would be. But I want to reiterate that our clients are opposed to the requirement that a trail easement be part of that platting in this process. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name's R.E. Cheney, and I'm the owner above this property at 41 Aspen Oak. So right where the right angle is in the bottom left of their property, my property is immediately adjacent. And I've been working with Mitch and Brian, and I was really happy with the fact that they were willing to put a height limit on this so that this doesn't affect my view, because I'm actually building right above this right now, and so I didn't want anything to be erected that was going to be right in front of me. So as long as that's something that's put in this approval that can't be changed, I'm totally comfortable with the height limit that we've agreed on. And I really like the fact that, you know, they modified this down from 8250 above grade to 5750, and, you know, we're asking for the below grade space because I think it would be similar to what's in the neighborhood. So I just wanted to voice my approval.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to verify.
Let's ask you a question.
Oh, is this your house?
Yeah, that's my, yes,
That's
that's
exactly
correct.
Anybody else wish to make a public comment at this time? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment, bring it back to the board. Patty?
I'll cut to the chase. I truly appreciate the reconsideration of above grade square footage. I am concerned about 4,000 square feet below grade because of the for me, in my mind, the construction impacts and the excavation of that amount of soil, and they're having to remove that soil from the property because I doubt that you're going to be able to keep that amount of removed soil on the site in the activity envelope. I think that would be hard to manage unless you could promise me you would do that, but I'm not sure you could accommodate that. I just think that there's construction impacts that are generated from an excavation of subgrade of 4,000 square feet and accumulative impacts of additional traffic and whatever else is associated with more square footage of a structure. So I would like to ask the applicant to consider further reduction of the subgrade from 4,000. I know they originally came in at 2,500, so I would like to see it cut in half from the 4,000 to 2,000 square feet subgrade, and then with the 57.5 above grade. I think to me that would be workable, fits in with the community, and we'd have less construction impacts and need to remove 4,000 square feet of subgrade soil. As far as the recent concerns about the trail, I'm not sure a trail easement across that ridge is going to get us anywhere. So it depends on how the rest of the board feels. I'm willing to go either way on it. And I do think that any conservation easement language or consideration by open space and trails, we need to have due notice to those neighbors so that they can be part of the process. We always accommodate that, and I think that's critical when something's going to be right there above them, something that they thought they had control over for so many years and did not have control over.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off of Patty's remarks. The size of the homes that we know not only impacts from construction point of view, and certainly the impacts that we're trying to deal with our landfill that we're quickly running out of space on. But there's certainly lots of other impacts, and given sort of the average size, at least on this lower section of this area. Once you get above 5,000 to 7,000 to 10,000, the traffic that's generated increases really substantially because you've got constant service needs of these large properties, and it's just never ending. And when it doesn't matter if the owner's on site or it's a second homeowner and they're just coming in during the holidays. The need to maintain and upkeep these large homes is a constant concern to neighborhoods, no matter what neighborhood you're in. So that would be my comment in terms of looking at reducing the subgrade to try to address not only the construction impacts but the ongoing traffic impacts that's going to be needed to service and maintain a home of this size. And that's something that we've talked about for a long time, and it's I'm hoping that we're going to come up with some new regs in this coming year to address some of these concerns. Rachel?
Yeah, I would just kind of do the follow-up to ask Mitch, what do you think your client would consider along those lines?
I honestly haven't discussed anything with him beyond 5750 and 4,000. I would have to ask him. I don't think he'd be thrilled with it, but I think he's a pragmatist. He'll say, if everybody can live with 2,000 below ground, that's better than nothing.
I just think we're getting very close. I think the concerns that have been brought forward by the neighbors are appropriate. whenever, as we were talking about the lower trail by Buttermilk Road, we always involve neighbors in a planning process like that. And I think we've all kind of heard the sensitivity to the potential of wildlife interference by easement across the conservation easement area. So I don't know that we need a trail easement there. It doesn't take away from your PUD application, believe you me, that it's just decided not to be used or not needed. But I would think it might be appropriate to see if we could continue this just for 2 weeks, give you a chance to talk to your the person you're representing, and I would suggest we schedule it before the Redstone Castle meeting, which is the next one coming up as well, clearly, because we've heard this one twice. And as I say, I do think we're getting very close, and if you could consider that and bring it back to us, then that would be the next step. So, if you would understand why we'd be tabling again.
I'm happy to have that discussion. If it means continuing first reading for 2 weeks and that's the only way to do it, then okay.
Yeah.
Unless there's a way to say that's what we're saying is good for first reading, come back at second reading, and it's either that or nothing. But I don't want to push for one or the other. Whatever is more
I'd have to
comfortable.
take the advice of my attorney in terms of, I think that if we passed it at first reading at 2,000 square below grade, we would not be able to expand it back.
Right.
And so we don't know that you've had that discussion yet, so maybe it would make sense to continue.
You're right. And at this, given how long we've been at this, and I'm not trying to say it's been longer than it should be, but 2 more weeks is
and
what's
if
the
it
difference?
if it adds to it, I would make the comment that for myself, moving down to the 5750 is very, very significant, and it's almost so that's not going to be in question anymore. I guess that's the part that I'm okay with, and I'd like to look at what reductions could be made in subgrade.
Yep. And while I'm just, if I can, as I told Eric, I'm very happy to extend notice to the Aspen Oaks HOA before the conservation easement, with or without the trail easement, goes to the Open Space and Trails Board. I would just need or ask that the condition be that Open Space and Trails lets me know when that board hearing is going to be. So that I can notify them.
You can be there too.
Because I did my past, I find out the hearing was 2 weeks ago, and then never tell me.
Okay. Okay.
Steve?
About the subgrade space, I'm not as concerned as Patty is. I think I would rather have more people in the county build subgrade space and make the houses smaller from the outside. The thing I'm concerned about is what could happen in the future, even if there's a conservation easement on the property, if it's not worded correctly. Conservation easements, in my mind, should be in perpetuity and not be able to be changed, but if it's not structured properly and worded properly, somebody in the future could come back in and apply. They could undo the PUD zoning. They would have 2 houses, and then the one lot would have 31 acres, and they theoretically could apply for 2 more houses on the 31 acres and comply with the 10-acre zoning. So that's like, the worst case scenario looking into the future. And I think if the landowner is really sensitive to the land and to the neighborhood, and if we could structure the conservation easement such that, it really is in perpetuity and there's no possibility of coming back at a future date, at a future board of commissioners, and change what we are trying to work on here today.
Greg?
I'm going to echo what Steve said. I appreciate the sentiments here. Kind of somebody who's new to this, the thing that strikes me is that if you've got an average home size in the neighborhood, regardless of what the approvals could be in the future and all that, we've got an average home size in the neighborhoods in the 48 range. 5750 to me seems like it's outsized. My first reaction is why? You want to build a place in a very highly visible area. Most of the lot is carved up by that big S-curve through there. Virtually everybody who drives to the ski area or any subdivision up there is going to be driving right through the front yard of this structure. And I'm just wondering why there's a compulsion to go even to the full size. That's my personal. I'm trying to get around that. It bothers me. Regarding the conservation easement, also, I don't know what the applicant can do regarding creating a conservation easement in perpetuity, but I certainly don't think there needs to have a trail component. But I'd certainly like to see what can be done to make sure that people understand that conservation easement cannot be compromised again.
So, Rachel?
Just to jump in the past, when people have wanted a little bit more of the belt and suspenders approach to a conservation easement, they consider having it jointly held with another organization like AVLT. And that way, even if a future Board of County Commissioners would change it, someone else would have a controlling power to say no.
Did that at North Star.
And AVLT may or may not want it. It may come with new strings about, they usually like some sort of endowment to help with their staff work maintaining it in the future. I don't know the details there, but I do appreciate the comment. And on one hand, you have to trust that future citizens and future boards are going to undo all the good work and allow a new owner, again, because we try to think of these properties in perpetuity as opposed to the current owner or the current applicant could always come back in. But the same is true with every single property, and say, I'd like to lift this, I'd like to do that, I'd like to do this, and it has to be up to those boards at times to say no and to understand the history that's occurred. But if we were to really be seeking a belt and suspenders approach to make sure there's nothing can fall down, we could take a look at that as well.
So,
can I just make it real quick?
Yes.
I just need to respond to Steve about the subgrade. I was on the board many years ago when we thought that was a good idea to allow significant amount of subgrade so people would reduce the square footage above grade. But we found the impacts from the removal of that amount of soil, where the soil went, the construction impacts, and that dirt being moved to the landfill had a significant negative impact, an unintended consequence. And so, which has caused me to rethink our great idea of putting more square footage subgrade. I'm not sure that's a great idea anymore. And at some point, I'd like us to reconsider that as a board in our land use code, because we've already tried to restrict above grade, and now we're seeing the impacts of the subgrade. Yeah. That's why I'm not supporting the 4,000 square feet subgrade.
So, Mitch, what I'm hearing, I'm sure you're hearing the same thing. I think we're close. I think we would probably have full support if we could tighten up that conservation easement to ensure that's goes in perpetuity, and if we can come up with a compromise in terms of
below grade,
minimizing the subgrade space. And if you're acceptable in terms of discussing that with your client, then I would suggest that I would ask for a motion by the board to continue this to a date certain, which would be, I think, September 27th.
I'd also like to make sure we write some provision in there for notification of the neighbors for the just so it's clear, and that we're all notified of the notification.
I'm good with all of, like I said, the notice. I agree. It should be done.
I just want to make sure it's in the
subgrade. I'm going to do my best.
Right.
Well, we appreciate that.
And then the question about the conservation easement, I just it's worth just stating, I guess, that we already have a condition here that we'd have to have a draft of it. The board would have to review it, Open Space and Trails would have to review it and accept it. And I've always envisioned every conservation easement as being in perpetuity. They always have some kind of amendment provision, but it's never an easy thing to do. And if we find, I'm happy to talk to AVLT if they want to be co-beneficiaries. I don't think we have any issue with that.
And we've done that in the past.
Yeah, and I've done that on county open space and trails and AVLT properties, sharing the beneficiary too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would accept the motion then.
I'll make a motion to continue first reading on, do we have two items we're continuing, Mike?
Yes.
To a date certain of September the 27th, and I'd like it to be scheduled before our land use issue about the Redstone Castle.
Yes, absolutely.
Second.
Second, any further discussion? See none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, great, thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to go on to open discussion. John Peacock told me he did not have anything that was pressing. Anybody else?
Did we want to discuss the issue of the request for a contribution, or do we want to save that for another open discussion?
I'd like to take a look at what we have in our contingency fund and things like that, and save it to a
Discretionary
future work session, open discussion.
All right.
And it's more of a policy question as well.
We have time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if nobody else has any open discussion, I would accept the motion. I'm sorry, Steve.
Well, we received a letter from Marcella Larson regarding the Celestial property variance that was granted, and
3 times.
I don't want to discuss it now, but I think if we could have that discussed in probably an executive session at some point in the near future, would probably be the appropriate.
I don't know if staff has even seen that
Yeah.
letter. Seen it, John?
If I could clarify, there was a letter to us from the newly formed Maroon Creek Caucus, and I forwarded that on to John Ely and I think Cindy Hubin with ComDev. And I think that our only real question at this point is procedurally, can you appeal a Board of Adjustments decision, and does that appeal go to this board? And that seemed to be the crux of the issue, is that they disagree with the Board of Adjustment decision. And I am just not sure of what the process is from that point.
So hopefully staff will get back to us on that.
Or if you know now, you could tell us now.
I haven't looked into it. I haven't seen the letter, so I'd prefer to look into it before I respond.
Before you make a comment?
Okay.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I was thinking. They would need to do some research and look into, so we can find out what the situation is, what the procedure is, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
That sounds good. And you did get a copy of that. I forwarded it to you, so you can flip that over to Suzanne. Perfect. Thank you.
Would you
I
like
would make a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Further discussion? Favor say aye.
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 Thanks.
Thank you, Grassroots.
Thanks,
And
Grassroots.
let's see, we have ELTC tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
At City Hall.
At City
Okay.
Hall.
Sounds good.